Hi everybody, hope you're well. This video is requested by Satyr. This is an updated version of how to raise Equus. So the main thing to keep in mind is making sure your earnings are higher than your costs. You know, you have to think about how much is a certain action going to make you in money, and is that worth it for that? So you're going to be comparing the cost to the profit. So in order to do things like raising Equus, I will talk in a lot of detail about selling horses for profit later on, but I'm just going to go through some of the other things that you can do first. So obviously one of the first things you can do is enter and win lots of competitions with your horses, and obviously one of the good things to do is obviously to search by the kitty, because if you're going in to try and win as much money as possible, you want to use higher horses to get into the higher level competitions, maybe use a divine because their kitties are quite high, and sort it by kitty and go in for those higher ones, because there's no point in going in the really low kitty competitions if you're trying to make a lot of Equus out of it, because some of the kitties are extremely low, like as low as 12 as low as maybe 10 or 12 Equus or something like that. So if you can go for the higher ones, do, and enter as many of those competitions daily with your horses as you possibly can. The other thing that you can do too, if you have a Grand Prix ticket, you can go in to the Grand Prix and enter that. And this is very good because you get Equus regardless of where you place in this. So obviously if you're taking part in it, you don't have to be using the best horse, you don't have to be using skillers, you'll still get money. So it is worthwhile doing that. Obviously if you have some of the bonuses for the Grand Prix, you will get more Equus, and obviously there is a bonus that allows you to enter more horses, so then you can get even more Equus from that. So doing that every day of the week, so Monday to Friday every week, obviously is going to help build up a little bit over the course of time. The other thing obviously is selling items that you don't need, so whether that's food, tack, resources, agriculture enhancements, various or black market items, you can sell these things to the shop and make money from that. Now some items are more worthwhile selling than others, so do bear that in mind, but obviously if you're not using something, you never use it, you might think that's a better idea to do that with it. The other thing is item exchange, obviously as I mentioned with the black market items, you can sell black market items for Equus. But one thing I'm going to mention is sometimes during promotions, certain items are needed on certain horses, so people, essentially maybe there's a promotion where people want hops. And if you have a load of horns of plenty, you'll get more money for those horns of plenty if you wait to a promotion like that than you would if you tried to sell them before. So do bear that in mind. Try and hold out and wait for those times when people really need them, because then you can charge a higher price because more people are going to be demanding them. The other thing too, obviously, is selling coverings. Now, whenever I talk about selling coverings, there's a couple of things that I would probably say are the better things to do. Selling unicorn coverings, maybe covers that aren't as popular, so going in and actually having a look at what horses are selling coverings and see if you have a horse that would maybe fit a specific area. Maybe it's a certain breed that's not very common, maybe it's a type of unicorn that's not very common, and you know, sometimes people will pay that little bit extra for a horse that maybe there's not as many of. If you can corner a certain market with your covers, then you're doing well. So that's something to bear in mind when you do that. You don't always have to be selling the best genetic potential covers. It just sometimes has to be the right type. So that's just something to bear in mind with those. Now, buying and selling horses, just to mention this a little bit, we will go into more detail with this. It's usually cheaper to buy out of auctions and then to resell in directs, because you will usually find, you see, the thing is about auctions, it takes a lot of time to go through auctions and sort of, you know, spend the time bidding and so forth, and that can be quite time consuming. So obviously whenever you go into auctions, you want to try and focus on specific horses, certain horses that you know are going to sell well in directs and you're going to make a good sized profit on, because there's no point in you sitting and spending a lot of time bidding on rubbish horses to then go and sell them in directs for rubbish prices. So do bear that in mind, and obviously be thinking about bidding. Whenever you go to bid, obviously a lot of these will automatically increment. As you can see, this automatically increments this up by another 100. But what you want to do is make sure that you actually only increment it by one Equus. If you want to save your Equus as much as possible, that's easier to do, and obviously going up one Equus at a time. Now obviously not everybody else is going to do that. Some people are just going to click on bid and it's going to do that auto thing, but it does save you money in the long run, because it saved, like me changing the numbers there to increment that by one has saved me 99 Equus. And that may not seem like a lot, but if you're bidding on hundreds and hundreds of horses every week, that adds up quite significantly. So obviously then, if we want to talk about doing lessons and missions and stuff with our horses, some of the things to bear in mind, I think, are obviously going for ECs with high lesson prices, as close to 60 E as you can get, but obviously that you're not having to spend 200 Equus to board. Try and get good ECs at a cheap price if possible, or a reasonable one. so that you're covering your cost of boarding there with the mission that you get. So if you could get an EC that was maybe, for example, 20 E to board per night, and you got maybe 50 per lesson or even 30 per lesson, at least you would be sort of covering the cost of boarding there, whereas there's no point in going for lessons that wouldn't. Now, in terms of getting money, you get money for logging in. Now we used to have salaries, but that's been replaced with the Breeder's Wealth privilege. So you get Equus for every day for logging in. So make sure you log in every day and collect that. It's not much, but it's still there and it's useful. The other thing is getting money from achievements in certain promotions, so reaching certain things and getting those prizes. Sometimes they're not fantastic, and sometimes it feels like you maybe have to spend more to get a rubbish amount of Equus. But if you can get it for pretty much nothing and you're not having to do anything significant, it is worthwhile doing that. And obviously taking part in promotions is a really big part of it, because if you're able to get certain things in the promotions that you might not be interested in personally, but other people might want, such as some of the gifts. Like, for example, whenever I got 50 points, I earned 2,000 Equus. You know, there's some BM items there that I could sell, maybe a shower that I could sell. You know, things like this. You think about these things. You may not want to take part in a promotion because you think, well, I'm not going to try and get the Divine and it's too expensive. But you might want to collect some of the things that are there that you can get for free by going so far in that specific promo. Now, there are several divines that will offer Equus for visiting them. Some of them you don't have to own. For example, Topaz, if you go to the pages of Topaz divines, which I'll just quickly show you will have seen, I do have videos on this. If you go to the page of a Topaz divine and you congratulate it, then you win some Equus. And if you're lucky enough, you'll get a diamond. So that's one of the divines. Some of the other ones include Xanthos. If you're lucky enough to win one of the Horns of Plenty, and I'll just quickly show you this in my history here. As you can see here, one of the people that stroked my Xanthos won a Horn of Plenty and 1,000 Equus. And my Xanthos actually gave me 200 Equus as well. So if you own Xanthos, you'll get a little bit of Equus occasionally, and also if you're somebody that wins from one, then you'll get a little bit of Equus as well. Okay, it doesn't happen often, but it's still there. The other thing is, if you're somebody that owns a Sapphire Divine, you can actually visit a specific player's page and get Equus or occasionally a diamond from them instead. So that's something if you have one of those. If you own a Chorus, it produces Equus instead of droppings. If you own a Greyfell as well, if it lives for 30 days and then you send it to heaven, you'll get 2 diamonds and 20,000 Equus, and then you bring it back to life with the Pandora's box, and you can do it all over again. You can do this repeatedly. Obviously, you have to wait 30 days for every time, but it's still better than nothing. The other thing to mention is the Polonius Parchment. So I'll just quickly scroll down here and show you Polonius Parchment. So the Polonius Parchment is very handy. If you have horses with the Polonius Parchment, age them every day, take care of them every day, okay? Because they produce Equus instead of manure. And the really great thing about this is, if they just produced manure and you sold the manure, you wouldn't get as much. You get a much higher amount from Polonius Parchment. So if you can put Polonius Parchments on a lot of maybe your agent point hunters, for example, that you're working every day already, then you're getting your APs done and you're collecting money. That's really handy to do that and try to have that all going together. And obviously, if you're able to put a Hypnos blanket on them as well, then you don't have to board them either, and you've just saved yourself some money. Now, obviously, you're still going to have to feed them out of your own pocket and your own resources, so do bear that in mind, that sometimes it might be better to board in a cheap EC and get, if that EC offers things like fodder and carrots, etc., because then you're not having to pay for them. You already paid for the board and you're using it out of their stock rather than your own. So sending horses to Safe Haven can be done, but it only gives you 400 Equus, which isn't fantastic. But what you can do is go to the Safe Haven every day and stroke a horse, and you sometimes will win Equus. Sometimes you'll win a carrot, or an apple or something else, but sometimes you do get a little bit of Equus. Now, the other thing I'm going to mention is the invite players, but I am going to give a bit of a warning with this. If you invite players to the game, if they join and they register, have with you as their sponsor, and this only happens if 2 people register within the same 24-hour period, you won't get this. But you get 2,000 Equus for this. Obviously, don't make multiple accounts to do this because you'll get banned really, really quick. So that's cheating if you do that. So don't do that. The other thing is, obviously, you can get UFOs, catch UFOs that have items in them, Equus, etc. And sometimes they're on people's pages. It's not just the regular horse CFOs. That's another way to earn money. Use your meadows in your workshops. Make sure there's either crops or you're growing cows. I know it sounds really odd, but you either have some cows in there to be raised or you're growing crops. Use your greenhouses during the winter months and the autumn months when you can't plant just about anything, and use your workshops. And obviously look at the estimate, the profitability of production. So see what is worthwhile in producing and check that. And obviously make sure that it's, reasonably, the cost that you're putting in is going to be worthwhile to get the profit. So think about those things. Now, some of the things that you can also do, and this is where I'm kind of going to get more into the horse side of it. When you buy horses when you go to buy horses, there's a couple of things you need to sort of take into consideration. You want to be buying at a reasonable or cheap price if you can do it. And you need to think about whether that horse is going to earn you more than it costs in its lifetime. So if you buy a horse maybe to look after it for a while, you don't want to sell it immediately on. Make sure that you're using it in competitions and make sure you're doing lessons with it so you're getting money back with that. The other thing to do as well is to try and get reasonable cheap covers from stallions, and don't just breed horses for the sake of it, okay? Think about what you're deciding to breed, because if you have a bad mare and you use a really great stallion and that stallion cover cost you a lot of money, the foal's going to come out kind of average, and then you're likely to not make profit with that foal because people are going to go, it's a bit of meh, and they're not probably going to buy it, or you're going to have to sell it quite low. So do make sure that if you're going to spend the time and the effort to breed horses, make sure you're producing something that people are going to want. And obviously if you have over 250,000 in reserve, your vet fees are going to be 2,500 Equus. That doesn't include the covering price, so bear that in mind. One of the best things to do actually, and I'm just going to quickly show you, this is a money saving tip. If you go into sell items, and I'm just going to do this really quickly, or actually not sell items, return to the shop, hold on, I'm going to buy. So if I go into resources and I buy wheat bran, one of the best things to do for me right now would be to buy just about 90,000 worth of wheat bran and get my Equus reserve under 10,000. And the reason for this is this would be the perfect time for me to cover mares, because to cover a mare, the vet fee would only be 100, and then you'll add on the covering fee. So I've already reduced the price and the cost of creating that foal. And obviously if I then want my Equus back because, for example, I need it, then I can just sell the wheat bran. And the reason I say wheat bran is because the wheat bran is 1 Equus to sell 1 piece of it and 1 Equus to buy. So 1 on 1, you're not losing anything. If I was to sell some other items, just for example, let's say I was to go and buy a bunch of apples, there's 6 Equus to buy, but when I go to sell the apples, I'm only getting 3, whereas the wheat bran is 1-to-1 ratio, so you're not losing any money doing that. Now, the other thing is, and I've mentioned this before, is try to board in a good EC, but cheap ECs, and make sure they've good lesson prices. And also take into consideration the benefits that those ECs have, because just for example, I'm just going to use mine. You can see that mine doesn't really have any benefits for boarders. I don't offer carrots, I don't offer fodder, etc. So if you were to board in my EC, you would have to use your own carrots and fodder out of your own inventory. So that's something to bear in mind when you're going to look for ECs, is try and get ones that have the carrots and the fodder provided. Maybe even the tack as well, because then you're going to have to save yourself buying tack. Now, if you can use your own EC to board, you could take that into consideration, because obviously then it's free, but then you have to make sure that you're aware that you're going to be using your own in-stock items to feed your horse, such as the fodder and the carrots that you have in your own stock. The other thing I want to mention, and this is to do with breeding, is don't use the ultrasounds on pregnant mares unless you have to. It's a waste of time unless you need to be using it. Now, there are some cases where you do need to know what your mare is going to have, what colour it's going to be, whether it's going to be a colt or a filly. But sometimes it's just it's worth aging her on and seeing what you actually get, rather than you doing an ultrasound early on, because it's 50 Equus each time. That's not a lot, but if you do it a lot, it adds up. It's kind of a waste of time. The other thing, as I mentioned, obviously, was I've already sort of mentioned storing your Equus to cover, but there's other things. Even whenever you're going to buy your pass from your reserve, use that trick that I showed you with the wheat bran. Okay, now I have used, I've said before to use the fodder, but the reason I'm switching to wheat bran is because when you go to buy fodder, you can only buy 10,000, but whenever you go to buy wheat bran, you can actually buy 100,000. So it's actually a lot better. You can sell more and it's a lot quicker, especially if you have a lot of money to move. So going back to the buying the horses, and I'm going to go a bit more into detail on this. Now I have a video about selling horses, and go and look at that in detail, because this that I'm going to talk about now is not going to go into the detail that you'll need, but it's going to cover some of the things. So obviously, as I said, buying horses in the auctions are a lot cheaper, but it is time consuming and only bid in those 1E increments. So don't be, as I go into this one, it automatically increments that to 100 more. Whereas I want to go and click 100, or sorry, just add the 1 on and remove the 100 and then bid, because then it's a lot cheaper. Because obviously you want to make sure that you're keeping the price as low as possible. If you're really, really serious about making your Equus reserve really high, you want to do that. And then if we just go back to sales, practice using the advanced search. And the reason I say this is because, and I really get a lot of PMs asking me for people to price their horses, and I can't price your horse for you. You really need to be able to price the horse yourself, because it's not fair for me to do it. Because if for example, if you were to go to somebody and say, right, can you price my horse for me? They might tell you your horse is worth nothing, and then say, could they buy it? And basically what they've just done is kind of maybe messed you about. So I'm not going to do that. I'm not saying I'm going to do that, but I don't like people asking me to price their horses for them, because then I feel like, they might disagree with what I say, and I feel like then, that's not where the position I want to be in. So get used to using this advanced search. Go use it. Find out, what horses are making money, what horses are not worthwhile spending. Because if you're going to spend a lot of time going into the auctions and buying horses, you want to make sure you're buying the right ones at low prices to then go and put in the directs and sell that are going to go quickly, or at least are going to make a high profit. You might have to wait a little while. And the other thing, obviously, too, is sometimes you have to wait. I mean, I find with some horses that I have, I might have to wait weeks, sometimes even months to sell something, but sometimes it's worth waiting out rather than trying to sell it off really, really cheap. Because then, obviously, if it goes for cheap, then, I haven't made possibly back what I spent on it. So some of the things to bear in mind, and if you've seen my selling horses video, you'll know this, is to look at what breed, look at the genetics, look at the age, look at the coat colour, the gender, whether it's purebred or partbred, because obviously some people like certain breeds, some breeds are rarer than others, so therefore they're going to be worth more. Some breeds are very, very, there's too many of them, so people are not going to pay as much for them. The other thing too is obviously the genetics. People want higher genetics, so you can search for higher genetics. Some people are interested in the age, so obviously if you want to find horses, I'll just quickly do this, so if you want to find horses that are maybe over 20 or something, to find pass or potential pass horses. Coat colour, obviously you want to try and get yourself aware of what coats are rare in terms of coat colour, because as we know, so I'll just quickly undo that again. I'll just click on a random breed for Alcatiki, for example. So if I have a look here, I've just identified that a strawberry roan and a flaxen liver chestnut are the 1% coats. So I should know that if I see a flaxen liver chestnut or a roan strawberry roan Alcatiki, that I know that those are the rarest coats, and they're more likely to make me money based on their coat colour. So, and the reason for this is obviously people need them for trophies. People need the coat colours for trophies. Bear that in mind. Also, I'm just going to mention this before I go on to my next point. Trophy horses. Think about the things that people need for the trophies. Not everybody has every breed. Not everybody has all the coats for every breed. Not everybody has all the Pegasus. So think about these things. Also pets as well, companions. Look out for those too, because those are some of the things that people get caught out on. And obviously unicorn breeds as well. Some unicorn breeds are not as popular as others, so sometimes it might be better for you to invest in getting yourself a rare unicorn breed and then breeding those unicorns, because they'll seldom be better than a really overly stocked breed where people have already got plenty of them. And then going back to that, obviously consider the gender. Sometimes you will find that certain genders will go for more than others, so whether it's a mare, a stallion, or a gelding, some of them are worth more based on those. You'll sort of find that as you go along. I tend to find fillies usually make more money, but that's not always the case, okay? Obviously, seeing if they're pure or part bred. Be very careful in case there's an Equus UFO right now. Okay, just proving the point. So obviously you want to be aware of the little purebred blue star, because some people will pay more for a purebred than they will a crossbred, and some people will pay more maybe for a crossbred than a purebred. But be aware of which one is more worthwhile spending on than another. And then the last thing that I'm going to mention is sometimes, and I know I'm guilty of this, sometimes when I have a large overstock of horses, for example, I'm just going to go in here and show you what I mean. So, for example, I have a bunch of Arab coats that I'm selling at the moment, right? Now, I've put them all in sales. But what would have probably been smarter, and I might have got more Equus for doing, is putting them in, one at a time, and only having a certain limited amount. Because if you think about this, if I had 1,000 or even 100 bay Arab horses, and I put them all in the sales for the same price, I have essentially just flooded the market, and you might tend to find that people get more picky, because when people have more variety to pick from, they're going to be a lot pickier about what they spend on. They are not going to be as inclined to spend on certain horses, and they'll try and get the best that they can for the money that they can. So that's just something to bear in mind. I know that I'm guilty of sometimes putting a bunch of horses in sales. That's just because I'm like, I want these out of my breeding farm. But if you want to make a lot of money, you want to think about this tactfully. Flooding the sales is not the answer. So you're maybe better putting maybe just a few in, or maybe just one of a certain coat, and just keeping the prices high. Because if you think about it too, is other people are trying to sell horses, and if you put in 1 million of the certain specific color or whatever, or maybe the specific breed, it crashes the whole market, kind of, and it takes a long time for that to rectify itself. And obviously, to be well aware, obviously, of fluctuations, you do tend to see when a new breed comes out, the prices go very, very high, and then suddenly they go, they'll start to decrease. So if you're not in that first wave, sometimes there's no point in investing to then be selling off at cheapish prices. Sometimes if you can get in there at the start and get the profit, that's fair enough, but if you can't, there's no point. So those are a couple of the things in terms of saving you money, gaining you money, and so forth. There's loads of other things that I've probably forgotten. If you have any money saving tips in terms of Equus, and do share. Thank you to Cedra for requesting the video, and hope you love your day. Bye.